We're talking firearms on this consumer goods edition of Industry Focus. Greetings, fools. I am Sean O'Reilly here at Fool Headquarters in Alexandria, Virginia. It is Tuesday, January 5th, 2016. Happy New Year. And joining me to talk firearms is my comrade in arms, Mr. Vincent Shen. Happy New Year, man. How's it going?
Happy New Year, Sean, and Happy New Year to all of our listeners.
So how's your holiday?
Excellent.
Was Santa good to you?
Yeah, sure. If by that you mean, a little stress from having a lot of family in town. Also got engaged last week.
What?
Should have mentioned that to you earlier.
Stop the presses. Ladies and gentlemen.
So
Vincent Shen here popped the question, apparently. Tell us a little bit before we talk about something totally different.
Fired it off, so to speak, to her last week. We were at a cabin out in Shenandoah, and it was very nice.
Was it like a New Year's thing or what?
No, it was before. It was in between Christmas.
Okay, yeah.
Sure.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
I need to take you and Gina to dinner or something to celebrate.
I won't turn down that offer.
We'll go to Korean barbecue.
Again, sure.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, long story short, and if our listeners may or may not be aware, President Obama is currently in the process of signing an executive action for basically stricter gun control laws. It's kind of we're not going to get into politics here. That's not our thing, but it's happening. Surprising, though, it's been kind of good for the gun industry.
Well, yeah, exactly. So, yesterday's trading, the markets kind of greeted 2016 with a little bit of a chilly reception. The Dow was down 276 points, 1.6%. S&P 500 shed similar, about 1.5%. So, like one of the worst opening days for the markets, like in history, one of the worst.
Well, this was kind of set off by a weak economic news in China, and they had like a 7% sell-off over there.
Yeah, and it could have been worse too if it hadn't. They implemented
they have
like
circuit
a new
breakers.
Circuit breaker. So they kind of do what a lot of the American exchanges have now, where that if the sell-off or it gets stripped by a certain amount, they'll halt the trading, which is exactly what happened yesterday. And then you combine a lot of that uncertainty around China, manufacturing, the implications around that around all over the world, plus some new tensions in the Middle East with a lot of countries stepping away from Iran, and that basically combined for a very bearish view, at least, for yesterday. And that seems to have continued into today, unless, like you mentioned.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're up again. And the standouts yesterday in the midst of the sell-off were all these gun manufacturers.
Exactly. So specifically,
there aren't many, but anyway.
Yeah, there aren't many options here in this sector, depending on if you're looking for a pure play gun manufacturer. There's, of course, people who make accessories, ammunition. But if we're looking at, Smith & Wesson Holding Company, they were up 6% yesterday. And then there's also Sturm Ruger up 3% yesterday, and we can talk a little bit about Vista Outdoor. They're up 2%. They produce a lot of ammunition,
right?
So, obviously still involved in that industry and tied to it. As you mentioned, why these companies buck the trend. We have these executive orders coming down the pipeline. They're supposed to be announced officially today. And, it's around background checks, more spending on enforcement, mental health, things along those lines. But what that has signaled for a lot of gun buyers in this country is, these new regulations, we might not be able to get certain, guns that are available now. So buy them now. So we should buy them now.
Get them while you can,
exactly.
Supposedly. And they're up even more today. I mean, this is going to keep, this is very impressive.
Yeah, they're up even more. Maybe because today is the official announcement. Smith & Wesson is, again, up 13% today.
Wow.
Last I checked. Ruger is up 7%, and Vista Outdoor is up 5%. And it's not all that surprising considering what we've seen in the aftermath of certain political moves, also tragedies, where people worry about what is going to be available, and there's a huge surge in demand. So again, not trying to hit into the political side of this too much, but just looking at these companies, their businesses, how their stocks have performed. We can dive in on the two main players at least.
And actually, on that note, before we move on, I wanted to point our listeners to the newly redesigned focus.fool.com. There you'll discover a special offer to join the Motley Fool Stock Advisor newsletter to start your year off foolishly. All loyal IF listeners have access to a special discount on Stock Advisor that works out to $129 for a full 2-year subscription. So go to focus.fool.com, take advantage of this offer. Once again, that's focus.fool.com. You can see my smiling face on one of the photos, I think. I think Dylan's with me. Anyway, so we're talking about share price performances. I mean, I don't want to say the word bubble, but just like, I'm always suspicious when a stock goes up because of something in the news like this. Like right after 9/11, Taser was the stock to own.
Sure.
It's just, I don't know. But apparently, and, we can dive in a little bit more here. They've actually been making a lot of money, like real money.
Absolutely. So Smith & Wesson, we'll talk about them first. They are up almost 200% since the end of 2012. And, that I feel like that time frame in particular is important. That was the last time President Obama, I feel like, made major calls for more gun control.
Right.
This was after the Sandy Hook tragedy, of course. And 2013 just ended up being a huge boon year for these companies. To just give you a little bit of context, so, the FBI, they have their NICS background check system. And while it's not a perfect proxy for gun sales in the U.S., it does give you an idea.
Ballpark.
Exactly. And, at least a trend, for example. And so the system's been in place since 1998. They've been tracking this data. And just to give you an idea.
So these are people applying to buy guns.
But each application could be for more than one, for example.
Okay.
And it doesn't cover all purchases, some being like private party sales, things along those lines.
Gun shows, stuff like that.
5 of its top 10 highest days where it recorded the most checks were in late 2012.
Wow.
Okay, so 5 of its 10 highest days were in late 2012, and by far the biggest week in terms of checks that they've logged, the FBI's logged, was between December 17th and December 23rd of 2012.
Merry Christmas.
Over 950,000 checks.
I was about to say, was it a million? Like, how many was it?
It was 950,000 for that week. And then the second record is actually a recent week from last month. It's like 860,000 maybe, so it's a huge difference.
Right.
And you also have to keep in mind, and we'll touch on this a little bit in terms of the prospects more recently, is the fact that, people were talking about Black Friday, biggest day ever in terms of new background checks being submitted. So
buy one get one free.
Smith & Wesson, along with much of the firearms industry, they rode that surge of demand into about 2014. Everybody was worried.
Then nothing happened, right?
No, nothing happened. The stock peaked at about over $16 per share, so that was up 90% from end of 2012.
Right.
And once the panic buying essentially had tapered off, the stores, or a lot of the dealers, the distributors, they saw their inventory building up quickly because
right,
the fears were gone.
Everybody calm down. Yeah,
exactly. So those quickly rose, and as a result, the stock struggled actually. And ended up losing almost all of its gains from that prior 2-year period in 2014.
Which is my concern again. Like, I'm just like, anyway.
An inherent thing that we'll get to later is the volatility of these companies. But not long after it started the stock bottomed out. 6 months later, gun control reemerged as a major political issue in 2015, especially with the presidential campaigns kicking off for a lot of candidates. And 2015 again became a big boon year for this company, where the stock rebounded 132%, and for the new year, as you've seen with these executive orders coming down, their 2016 is looking very, very good for them as well.
So what were their revenues doing? I took a quick glance, and in these years where the stocks go up, it's like revenues are like 50% year over year.
So looking at it quarterly, so in 2013 quarters, for example, total revenue up 40% year over year, 26%. And then after that 2013 surge quickly subsided, it was down to single digits, and then it fell. So by 2014, you were looking at like a 23, 24% year over year drop in revenue. You're seeing those big swings in demand based on, honestly, not necessarily business fundamentals, but
fear.
Exactly. Now, the company in its most recent quarter So it announced its fiscal 2016 second quarter results last month around this time.
Okay.
It boasted 32% year-over-year revenue growth. Gross margin was up 7.1 percentage points.
This is a growth tech company we're
And,
talking about. That's what those numbers
Adjusted
are.
earnings were up 150%. So, and just yesterday, I probably contributing to the huge surge sale where the stock's up like 12-13%, the company raised its sales and earnings guidance for the quarter and full year. So fiscal 2016 revenue, which ends in April, I believe, it's expected to come in between $650 and $660 million, while adjusted earnings will be between $136 and $141 per share. So that represents about 19% top line growth and 36% bottom line growth if you use the middle of those ranges compared to 2014. Full year, that is.
So, obviously, you got Sturm & Ruger. Smith & Wesson's kind of a bellwether for industry. How are things looking for them going forward?
Sure,
Did you come across anything?
So, looking forward, I think the company's honestly it's going to benefit from a lot of this uncertainty around this presidential election, because basically, the way it comes down is if you have a Democrat
right
take
and that's
office, then
one thing that I was about to chime in with. I was like, it's crazy to me sometimes how much a presidential election can affect a stock.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I bought the stock because Buffett owned it, but it's USG. This is like my first stock I ever bought. I was like 16. But they make drywall. It's sheetrock, United States Gypsum. And they were being sued for like $2.1 billion for asbestos litigation. This is in the 2004 election. And the stock went up like double the day Bush got reelected, just because they figured that a Republican administration would be kinder to a company.
More business friendly.
Yeah. And I was like, what? Like, I did not anticipate that at all. I'm almost wondering if that's going to happen again in, a year.
Yeah, so people are going to come down like really hard lines, whether or not there will be a ton of new regulations depending on the president. It doesn't even matter. It's what's perceived.
Right.
And for 2016, until the run-up, until the results are announced, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty, and I think the company will benefit from that, at least for the next year or two. And then beyond that, if you're looking at just more of the fundamental business,
it's a coin flip at that point then, though.
Exactly. Consumers, though, make up about 90% of the Smith & Wesson business.
Do they sell to the government at all?
So they do have a huge opportunity there to increase some of their selling with government contracts, because ultimately the U.S. government
10% isn't.
The U.S. government is still one of the biggest buyers of firearms in this country, if not the largest.
Yeah.
So that's definitely an area of opportunity for them looking forward.
Cool. Okay. So talk to me about Sturm & Ruger.
Okay. So I wanted you to look at this almost like very closely as like a mirror image.
Okay.
So in terms of a lot of that performance in 2013, how things dipped in 2014, and how they've recovered last year, all of that is almost exactly the same. Maybe a shift in terms of the exact timing, but overall very similar. So for example, Sturm Ruger shares gained 70% in 2013 when revenue was up 40% over the previous year. Again, after the fears from the Sandy Hook tragedy, the stock peaked in early 2014, so a little bit earlier than Smith & Wesson. In that year, sales fell 21%. Very tough comparisons, right? Very tough comparisons. And the stock plummeted, reversed all of its gains, lost about 60%. More than the gains it made, lost 60%. And in 2015, again, it roared back 70% on the surge in demand. So last November, the company reported its third quarter results, and sales were up 23% year over year to $120.9 million. Earnings per share up 82%. Sound familiar? And its new products, which include all its major new offerings from the past 2 years, made up about a fifth of total sales in the first 9 months of 2015. So obviously, their product pipeline that's coming in, it's doing quite well. It's very popular.
Cool. All right, so I'm a value guy. Talk to me about where these guys are trading.
Sure. So, and I know you're going to ask me at the end of the show, like, which one I think is better.
Of course
I'm going to preempt that question and cover it a little bit. So, Sturm Ruger...
Which stock would Dirty Harry buy?
Smith & Wesson, obviously. But Sturm Ruger pays 2.5% dividend, so it's a little different because whereas Smith & Wesson doesn't pay one at all. Valuation-wise, they're very similar. So I calculated this based off of their prices this morning with the surge they've seen recently, because that's likely to continue, and based off of expected 2015 calendar year earnings. So 22 times for Sturm Ruger, 21 times for Smith & Wesson. Now,
Yeah,
keep in
so
mind that
it's-
Ruger has a really strong balance sheet, no debt. They have very strong free
Are
cash
they
flow.
family controlled? I'm reaching into the cobwebs here. They have a
I actually
big.
do not
Let's
recall.
look anyway.
But they have really strong free cash flow to cover the dividend payouts. And honestly, both companies have a very strong name and reputation in this
Right.
industry. So like I mentioned, Smith & Wesson 21 times, no dividend, but similar strong cash flow. So if you were to ask me to pick, I think it's really tough.
Sounds to me like you could buy both and be fine.
I think you should look not at the company separately necessarily if you're first considering investing in this industry. You need to look at the volatility and the fact that these companies are not necessarily going to be driven by business fundamentals,
Right.
And things along those lines. A lot of it's going to rise in lockstep with each other, and a lot of it's going to be driven by headlines, what happens in the political landscape. So it's just tons and tons of volatility. So if you're okay with that,
I mean, this has a speculative feel to it.
Exactly.
I mean, it really does. So.
And I think for a stock like this or for an industry like this, taking a truly long-term view is your best bet, because and I think anybody who's trying to bet off the election.
So do you want to
you're
own
gambling,
these guys
essentially.
regardless of what happens in the next year?
And then
or
between the two
presidential or
companies,
anything? Yeah.
think you can look at that income component that Ruger offers.
Yeah, I was just surprised. That's very reasonable.
But otherwise, considering either of these, definitely take that long-term view, and also just consider the fact that it might get hit, whether you think the business is doing well or whether or not, just with the way events can take place with the presidential election and everything else. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your thoughts. And I'm sure on behalf of our audience, once again, congratulations on the engagement.
Thanks, John.
And if you're a loyal listener and have questions or comments, we would love to hear from you. Just email us at industryfocus@fool.com. Again, that's industryfocus@fool.com. And as always, people in this program may have interests in the stocks they talk about, and the Motley Fool may have formal recommendations for or against those stocks. So don't buy or sell anything based solely on what you hear on this program. For the newly engaged Vincent Shen, I'm Sean O'Reilly. Thanks for listening, and Fool on.